Lawwin Media Network.
Bringing to you the most relevant content across all platforms.
Business, legal, politics, health, lifestyle, and entertainment.
Your source for all the news and updates in the greater Houston community from Texas and all over the world.
Get informed and empowered with Lawwin Media Network.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Pink Table Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Carly D., a doctorally prepared registered nurse, educator, mentor, professional development specialist, and victims advocate and thriver. The show is produced by Lawwin Media Network, and it's available live Wednesdays at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, either through our YouTube Live channel, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, and on all podcast platforms. Tonight, I'm happy to welcome back Christina Stuller, our healing but dealing expert. She was on our show back in season 1, where we talked about love addiction. Tonight, we're going to be talking about toxic relationship patterns and how to build healthy relationship patterns and habits. Christina is a certified life coach, counselor, and PhD student in transpersonal counseling. She helps people heal from narcissistic abuse, codependency, and emotional trauma. She's the founder of Tranquil Balanced Life Coaching and the creator of the Healing but Dealing movement. After surviving an abusive relationship, personal loss, and stage 4 cancer diagnosis, she has turned her pain into purpose. She now guides others through their healing journeys with equal parts clinical insight, lived experience, and a no-nonsense compassion. Her mission is to help people take their power back without losing their heart in the process. So everybody, welcome to the show, Christina Stuller.
Hey, Dr. Carly.
Hey, Christina. I'm so happy to see you.
Me too. It's good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You're one of my favorite life coaches out here on the market today. I love your no nonsense approach, and it's helped transform my life personally. And so I love to share you with the world.
Well, thank you. The no nonsense people seem to be a big fan of. So.
Yes. So I love that because for me, it doesn't allow people to hide. And, when you're dealing with narcissistic patterns, those people love to mask and hide. And so that no nonsense approach helps us to kind of pull that mask off right away. So thank you for showing me that.
Absolutely. I hope that it's being put to good use. I'm sure that it is.
Yes, absolutely. Can you remind our audience a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're currently doing?
Yeah. So as mentioned before in the bio, my name's Christina. I have Tranquil Balance Life Coaching. I have 6 rooms a week on a different app called Circles. Let's see, lots of ums here. Been working on my PhD. Just busy, just doing the same thing, still counseling, still doing all those other things. Started a new project on Zoom once a week. So that's actually been really good with a lot of feedback in terms of shadow work. I've been helping people focus more within themselves and pointing that finger inwards as opposed to pointing that finger outwards. So it's a different level of the healing journey, but it's definitely necessary, and it's really received amazing feedback. So I'm really happy about that.
Wow, that's interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about shadow work? I've been hearing a lot about it for the past year, and I've seen some journals online, but can you explain to us more what it is and how it helps people?
Yeah. So Carl Jung is the one who actually came up with shadow work, and it's to focus on how people have a duality to them. So there really is those two sides. And for the shadow self, it's to not reject it, but to integrate it. Because nobody introduces themselves as saying, "Hi, my name's Christina, and I'm a very jealous and envy, anything like that." So we seem to suppress those, but they do show up in other people, and it helps us actually focus on our judgments because our judgment comes from what we see in another person is what we see within ourselves. So it's actually very interesting, and it's to help release all judgments and things like that, which is very helpful. It also allows more of focusing on the similarities rather than the differences when you meet people, because that actually seems to help a lot of the ebb and flow as well when we focus on the green flags and we focus on the similarities as opposed to the differences.
Yeah.
In a world filled with fleeting moments, there's beauty waiting to be captured. My name is Christian, and I specialize in immortalizing your most precious memories, from elegant weddings to vibrant events and timeless portraits. I'm here to make every moment unforgettable. Let me tell your story through the lens. Contact me today and let's create magic together.
Join us for a captivating new series where Lon sits down with the trailblazers of the music and entertainment world. Discover the stories behind the faces and voices that shape our culture and community.
We will bring you exclusive interviews with industry legends and rising stars. Behind the scenes insights and get a peek into the creative processes and personal journeys. Artists and performers and their upcoming shows and events.
Stay tuned for more updates and sneak peeks. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our channel.
Okay, everybody, we are back. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. So we will continue on with Christina Stiller. She was discussing shadow.
I'm not sure where I lost you at. I can say it again, but I pretty much described it all. So it's very helpful though to release judgments in yourself and also through other people. I truly feel it's impossible for me to judge another person now, which is a great feeling. It's good.
Yes, that's awesome. And you mentioned that we all have a duality to us. Can you explain what that means?
Right. So those would be the behaviors that we don't boast about. Like we don't introduce ourselves by saying, "Hi, I'm very jealous," or "I am emotionally abusive," or anything of that nature. And so those things, sometimes those are really positive things. In order to be, somebody could think that someone may see arrogance, but it's actually confidence. And so it helps kind of filter that perception versus the reality aspect of it. And it really releases that judgment in those walls, because generally our judgment comes from what we see in ourselves in another person, but we may not receive that same outcome. And like we may not like people that interrupt us, but we're the ones that are always interrupting because we want to be, seen, heard, things like that. So it kind of levels those away, like levels those out.
Interesting. Would you say that our own judgments are affected by the things we're insecure about, or maybe issues that we're struggling with?
Absolutely. I truly believe it's impossible for us to judge ourselves because all of our judgments don't really belong to us. It's things that other people have said that they were was wrong, and we can't judge unless somebody tells us that something is wrong with us, and then we start to compare. And that's what kind of filters in those negative thoughts and that negative way of thinking. So absolutely, it's something that we kind of do to ourselves. And I hate to say that, but I'm guilty of it as well. But it's something that we definitely have to work through, and just realize that even that voice in our head, that inner critic, it's not usually ours. If we really listen to those words, we can pinpoint the person who actually created those negative thoughts.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you think the source is our family, especially our parents, where that negative voice comes from?
100%. Generally, our primary caregiver. So I still hear my mother saying, "A minute on the lips, a year on the hips." So
Yes, yes, it's so true. That's why I'm such a believer in making sure that children have a healthy upbringing. But it's so hard to do. I feel that as myself as a parent, I'm always trying to watch what I say. But there's days where I'm just tired and I can't be that what is it, a gentle parent and use the most, socially appropriate, politically correct, whatever, therapeutic words. And so, then I'm thinking to myself, oh no, are they going to have a self-conscious thing about this for the rest of their life now? And so I'm more aware of that. And so I actively work on that every day. But it's so true. Our families can definitely shape our inner critic.
absolutely. And the awareness, that's a gift. So definitely embrace the awareness because, it really depends how we approach it because we can go to it as in a negative way, but really it's a level of awareness. And unfortunately, we wouldn't know these things unless certain events happened. And I wish I could have learned them any other way than the way that I did. But it's still nice to know to embrace that awareness. So you're doing the best that you can with everything that you have. And I know that you're a great parent. So keep it up.
Yes, thank you. And I do give myself grace and I do apologize. If I had a bad moment, I'd be like, oh, sorry, mommy was, angry at that moment. And I try to, let them know that we're human and we make mistakes. And they're always so gentle and forgiving. And so, it's nice to also extend that grace to yourself.
Yep. It's very important to do that
And
for
so with
ourselves.
the shadow work, yes, thank you. With the shadow work, do you use a journal? Have you created your own journal? Because I know you've written a couple of journals and books yourself. How do you do your shadow work?
So I actually did create a couple of journals. I've created a journal for shadow work in terms of addiction and also a workbook on our golden shadow, which is the positive things about us, because it's so much easier to mention our flaws than it is to mention the great things, because we were raised as in don't brag or you shouldn't do that. And so there's a journal on that. And the golden shadow is actually much harder to work with people on, which is it's very interesting since we're all wanting to heal and to grow. But when it's time to start talking about the good things about ourselves, that one's still a difficult one to break through on. But definitely lots of journals, a lot of self-reflection, and it's just looking at it from a different perspective rather than the world having events that happen to you. It's how how you're approaching it, how you're seeing it, because really everything that happens to us was never because of us, but we're the ones that add all that emotion to it, and we're the ones that have that meaning, especially when it comes to the word love. Right? If I say I love you, so many people think, oh, it's the way that I mean it, but we never stop to ask, what does love mean for you? Because our definitions are always so different. So it's really to kind of process that on the words that we define, writing our own dictionaries, comparing it to the actual written word. And what's interesting is that we give so many words emotion, and when you look them up in the dictionary, there's no emotion attached to it. So it really just shows that we all use the words correctly, but we define them all differently. And it's a step-by-step approach. It's really good. And sometimes people get upset because it's not about the story. You know, you could tell me all the events that happened, and I would stop people and I say, that doesn't matter. And they're like, what do you mean that doesn't matter? It doesn't matter. Tell me how you feel. And then
Yeah.
that's different because that's the power that we're giving to that scenario and to that situation.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And you know, it's so true. I can resonate with people having a hard time talking positive about themselves. You know, I feel, especially if you grew up in maybe like a very critical home, you know, where you're constantly being criticized about everything, always hearing all the bad and never being praised for the good. So you do kind of have this complex where it's like, well, if I praise myself, then I'm being, you know, arrogant, or I'm, you know, boasting in myself. And so it is hard for us to say, oh, you know, I am smart, or I am a kind person. I always find that people have a hard time also accepting compliments. You know, we're so used to putting ourselves down or talking bad about ourselves in front of others, that it's hard for us to talk good about ourselves. So I love that you have the Golden Shadow book. I think that's really brilliant.
It's really nice. It's a nice little mix because sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves and it's difficult to kind of sift through all the trauma, that it's nice to kind of sprinkle the sunshine on it as well. So
That's beautiful. That's absolutely wonderful. We're going to go to our first break of the evening, everybody, but stay tuned for more Pink Table Talk with Christina Stellar.
In a world filled with fleeting moments, there's beauty waiting to be captured. My name is Christian, and I specialize in immortalizing your most precious memories, from elegant weddings to vibrant events and timeless portraits. I'm here to make every moment unforgettable. Let me tell your story through the lens. Contact me today and let's create magic together.
Welcome back to Pink Table Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Carly D. Tonight, we're talking about toxic relationships and how to build healthy, positive relationship habits. We're talking with life coach, Christina Stellar. And so before we went on break, you talked about how our feelings are different when it comes to some of the wording that we use. Can you explain more about that?
sure. So the exercise that I did one time was I had everybody give me their definition of family, home, and love. And as we're all going around the room, everybody had these like beautiful definitions and it had all this emotion and all this feeling. And then when I read it, it was like, you know, a home. It was a compound with four walls. You know, it was something that was so like, really? When people are like home, like it's where love, you know, like everything happens, family, togetherness. And nope, it's just a building with four walls. That's about it. So where one resides in. And it was a good exercise. So even though we use the words appropriately and correctly, we don't have the same definitions as someone else. So it's really good to now ask for clarification, especially in relationships, especially if we got out of a toxic relationship. We're actually too afraid to question because we feel that maybe we're bringing over some of that betrayal trauma with us. And we think, oh, well, it's a new relationship, it's a different person. But what we don't identify is it's the same pattern. And so we bring that pattern over to us because, you know, it's not chemistry, it's familiarity. And our
Yes.
subconscious does not seek this, doesn't make the smartest decision. It just wants to feel the safest, the quickest. So, you know, we can find comfort in chaos and all those things. But once we identify the patterns and it's our patterns, that's when we can really start to make drastic changes in the people that we associate ourselves with and things like that.
I love that because I was just having this conversation earlier today. I love how you said that it's not the people that are the same, but it's the patterns that you notice is the same. And so, can you talk to us about that? How do we develop toxic patterns in relationships or even friendships? And then, how can we break free from those patterns?
It starts with our codependency. You know, codependency is something that was it's a behavior that was learned and conditioned from a very, very young age. So our entire lives we didn't know that that was going to be a bad thing, because all we did was we gave love, and we gave and gave, and we received stuff in return. But then as we got older, that's when we started to, see how much we were pouring into people that were not pouring back into us. And then that's when we were becoming frustrated and things like that. So it definitely starts with the codependency and identifying that, because I joke around, I say I'm a high functioning codependent. To me, codependency is not a bad thing. It means you just love really, really hard, but it can be a bad thing because of, are we loving ourselves the same way as we love others? Are we pouring into ourselves? And generally we're not. So when we have those weak boundaries that are bendable and unbreakable, yes, the boundaries are meant to protect us, but then there's the confusion of a boundary and a rule. A rule is meant to control someone else, but a boundary is the line in our sand. It's to protect us. It's our non-negotiable. And sometimes we seem to forget that because we create this rule that has another person make us feel better. And then that's when we're still following that same pattern. So once we identify the patterns, I feel anything is fixable at that point. But it's breaking free from that codependency and things of that. But it takes time.
Yes. Can you define two things for us? Codependency and then boundary, and how people can create boundaries.
Right. So as mentioned, codependency is when we are more dependent on another person. It actually is a term that was formed in AA from way, way back then. But codependency is really, interdependence is what we want. And sometimes we can get that confused. But when we are pouring and giving and when we feel frustrated, that's a sign from above that we're not giving to ourselves. And that right there is kind of a little flag that, we might be codependent. When it comes to our boundaries, we can say we have boundaries, but the number one, this is how you can really tell if someone understands boundaries, is if you say no and they ask, but why? Because but why is not a clarification question. They don't need clarification. They're not understanding that no is the answer. So that's generally how you can tell if somebody doesn't understand boundaries. And so with that boundary, it's the line in the sand. It's my non-negotiable. It's there to protect me. Because if we don't have those, then where do we end and the next person begins? And we just kind of flow and merge into one. And then we're sacrificing ourselves, and we're so concerned what another person is doing. And, we're just falling apart. And it really comes with that, that can't even think of the word right now, that intermittent, can't think of the word right now, but yeah, it's a tough one to break. And when you don't understand the boundaries, it's definitely hard, because I learned the hard way. I was a but why person, but why? It's me. Come on, but why? And we all think we're the exception to the rule, but
I know my kids, they definitely always ask me, but why, mommy? Why? And they try to bargain with me, all the time. And I know if I say yes one time, they're going to come back, but why, mommy? And sometimes they have really great questions. I'll be like, well, you can't do that. And they'll be like, but this other thing happened yesterday and you let it happen. And I'm like, you got me.
oh, that's good. That's smart.
Yeah, no, they know how to rationalize. And sometimes they will say things that are just so smart. You're like, how old are you again? But
That's
they
good,
definitely, they get a lot, way more in dessert and sweets than they probably should.
Well, that's good though, that they have that reasoning. That's good. That's very good. You have little negotiators on your hands.
Oh yeah, they're like, well, I just had something savory, so I need something sweet, of course, to balance it. And I'm like, how do you know to say that? We have a question from our audience member. May DeFerris said, why is it that when I finally decided to choose myself over anyone else, this offended a lot of people? Like choosing myself is something wrong. This is a very good question, and I've heard about this a lot. I'll have you answer that, Christina.
Welcome to being surrounded by toxic people. If you think that you only need one, You're wrong. You know many of them. And that right there, if they are resistant to you choosing yourself, that shows that now you have boundaries and they don't like that. They're used to you giving in, they're used to you saying no. So I think it's wonderful to choose yourself. There's a difference between being dismissive and choosing ourselves. But in that question, I highly doubt that that's even the issue. When you choose yourself, when you say no, that's protecting yourself. If you say no all the time, then explore that one to see. But no, generally when people push back on that, it shows their lack of boundaries and that they're toxic in a way. And I don't want to say in a bad way because we all have these, little toxic traits to us. But yeah, that's definitely welcome to the world of boundaries. I'm so glad you have them.
For me, that was the big awakening for myself when I learned that I was finally developing a voice. I was like, oh, all these people are mad at me now. And, I went most of my life up until like 30, being a people pleaser. So I always said yes. I always found a way. There was never a no. It was hard for me to even formulate no. It was like, ooh, this feels weird saying no. And so once I started doing that and speaking up or saying, no, I can't because, I'm tired or I have other obligations, I noticed the shift. And I noticed the dynamics changed in a lot of my close and intimate relationships, even with my work. I noticed when you tell, oh, I can't, I'm not available that day, or no, I can't stay late. Now all of a sudden you're a problem. And so for me, I at first saw this as, oh, let me step back. Maybe I don't need boundaries. Maybe I don't need to be this all you can be woman. But then it started to hurt me when I kept caving in and giving more and more of myself. And at the end of the day, I found myself unhappy, drained mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so once I started to put those boundaries back up and start pouring into myself, that's when I started to have peace and I could sleep at night. That's okay. You can be mad. You don't have to like what I had to say. It wasn't me being rude or violent. And I'm okay. You can be upset, but I know I have to protect my inner peace. And so that's helped me to continue to developing boundaries. I'm still learning. There's still areas of improvement, but I can't go back to who I was prior. I just can't.
Well, that's wonderful. And I'm glad because that is a beautiful shift to know and find your peace. That's a beautiful thing because once you have your peace, you protect it and nobody can ever take that away from you again. And I still ask myself, even after all these years, am I being vulnerable or am I people pleasing? Because vulnerability is a beautiful thing. But sometimes with the answers, it's like, do I want this person to like me? So let me just say yes, or I'll just say yes one time. But then we realize we then have a hard time saying no once we're already uncomfortably saying yes. So it's really important to choose ourselves, to choose our peace, not in a dismissive way. And it's trial and error. It's a practice. You have to kind of see what works and what doesn't work. It's not just going to come out of the ballpark perfectly. But when we have even assertive communication, because there's the acronym that I always tell everybody, it's think. So think before you speak. Is everything that's about to come in your mouth, is it truthful, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind? So if all of those things are not in that alignment, then you know what to pull out. And so that's even with assertive communication, because, sometimes people will say, I was telling them no, and I was yelling at them. And it's like, that's not assertive. That's still being rude, because you don't have to be hurtful or unkind or anything like that. And it's very hard because when we didn't have a voice for so long, once we get that voice, we're like shouting from the mountaintops, but we still are attacking. And that's kind of when we can develop those patterns of what we see that we picked up from the past relationships throughout our entire lives. And we navigate it. And that's where we protect our peace. We find out who we are, and all is good, all is right. So get rid of all the toxic people. And I always tell everybody it's not forever, it's just for right now. you know, because sometimes people struggle with cutting their families off, and I completely understand that. But it is for right now, not forever. Because you have to know yourself first before you can try to fix another relationship, whether it's with a family member or even in a romantic relationship. It's very difficult because sometimes we don't even admit that something is toxic. We keep just brushing it aside and we keep hoping tomorrow will be different, right? Or it'll be a new day and this and that. And then we start to see, what patterns we're developing for ourselves. And that leads on to more heartache and pain and yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Awesome. Awesome. Oh, this is getting good. This is getting really juicy. But we have to take our second break of the evening. But everybody stay tuned for more Pink Table Talk with Christina Stubb.
Join us for a captivating new series where Lon sits down with the trailblazers of the music and entertainment world. Discover the stories behind the faces and voices that shape our culture and community.
We will bring you exclusive interviews with industry legends and rising stars. Behind the scenes insights and get a peek into the creative processes and personal journeys. Artists and performers and their upcoming shows and events.
Stay tuned for more updates and sneak peeks. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our channel.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We have another comment. So May had a follow-up to her previous question. She said, I'm not sure if there's something wrong with me, but whenever I try to set up boundaries and people react to that in a bad way, I also feel bad, like I end up overthinking and blaming myself for someone hurting or offending them. Is that normal, Christina, for people to feel that way once they set up these boundaries?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Boundaries do not feel good right out of the gate. It's uncomfortable. It's unknown territory. And we don't know what exactly we're navigating because it's not what we say, but how we say it. And generally, we don't really know. Like if somebody hurts us, we hurt other people. Hurt people do hurt people. If somebody makes us feel a way, we react rather than respond. And we say, well, this wouldn't have happened if you didn't do this. And with lots of shadow work, that's when we realize that all that, it goes away. It doesn't matter because it's how we treat people that really matters. And if we know that our intentions are well, then then at least we know that and we're protecting our peace. And people don't know unless you tell them. So if somebody does say, hey, you hurt my feelings, I apologize, that's not my approach, that wasn't my intention, but this is just how I'm feeling. And that's when you kind of navigate that. But toxic people will make you feel guilty when they don't get their way. And so there's three questions you should always ask yourself. Are you upset because another person didn't do what you wanted them to do? Are you upset or angry because they didn't say what you wanted them to say, or they didn't act the way you wanted them to act? And if any of those are yes, then that's an us thing. Then that shows that our approach was incorrect. That shows lots of other things that we can change and we can control because that falls on us. We have the power to do that rather than us give our power to somebody else. And that generally does happen because we can live in a victim mentality and we can say everything that happened with our lives and our story. But that doesn't matter because do we want somebody to pity us or do we want somebody to just maybe empathize and be there and comfort? And sometimes we can get trapped in that story and we can change that. We have the power to change all that. So yes, navigating boundaries is very, very, very difficult. But with practice, consistency, time, and effort, yes, you can definitely master that. And people don't know that they're hurt, that you've hurt their feelings. But if it's in a way where they didn't get what they wanted, then that's a them thing. Then, yeah.
Yes.
Then you can walk away knowing you did the best you could. And you're just like, okay, tell me how that works out.
I struggled with that too early on with developing boundaries. It's like, oh, now they hate me. And I've been a person who always wanted people to like me and to, you know, have people feel positive about me. It was uncomfortable dealing with that kind of felt like rejection, you know, or them saying that I'm a bad person, you know, because my whole life I was like, oh, all these bad people I'm surrounded by, and now here I'm being called a bad person, you know. And so for me, it was hard accepting that. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, you know, if they're mad because, you know, I couldn't, you know, go help them at the grocery stores or go help them move that day, but I had a valid reason not to, you know, to protect myself in some way. Unfortunately, I have to deal with them being upset, you know, because what is the other alternative? Me going and giving myself and getting injured or feeling sick. But they're happy, but I feel terrible. And so it was a hard lesson to learn, choosing myself, you know.
And we also get stuck in the pattern of still people pleasing and saying yes and then bailing out, because then all of a sudden that's when we're choosing ourselves. And that is not a healthy pattern. It's good to have that realization that, okay, but it's also good to explain. I know I said yes, I didn't think about it, and just being truly honest. But we can also get caught up in that where, you know, we just want people like us. So we say yes, you know, and then when it comes down to it, we're like, I can't do this. And so we're always bailing out, we're always canceling. And that can become a toxic pattern in ourselves. But it's as long as we recognize it, we can make that shift and we can change it. Because to say no, that shouldn't hurt anybody's feelings, you know, and no is no is no, no is beautiful. So
Yes, no is a whole sentence.
that it is, that it definitely is.
Yes, and I told my children, I coined this term last year when we were in Target and they wanted some candy. I said, respect the no.
I love that.
And they were like, you know, they of course they're shocked. And I'm like, I just said no, so respect the no. I didn't, you know, um, but I said when you mentioned, you know, not to always say yes. You know, it's a toxic habit. You know, when you're in that people agree to everything, and you're to always overcommit. And so I and a little bit of technical lag here. Hopefully that cleared up. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Sorry, we're having a little technical issues there. Before we went on break, we were talking about overcommitting and how that also can be a toxic trait. I like how you mentioned, Christina, that if a person always constantly agrees, but then they cancel or they backtrack on their words, that can also become a toxic trait. I had to learn that for myself too. I had to learn to let my yes be yes and my no be no. And so over the past couple of years, I've been really working hard to improve in that area. So now I used to feel like I had to answer people right away when they asked me, oh, can you help me with this? Or can you go to this place with me? And now I'll think about it. You know, I'll say, well, give me a day or two to get back to you on that. Because that allows me time to say, am I saying yes for them? Or is this something that I really want to do or can do? Or do I have the capacity at this time to do? But yet again, I also notice when you tell people, well, I can help, but maybe wait, people also don't like that. But I know for myself, being honest and understanding my limits and capacity, it helps me to not overcommit. You know, I used to be, oh yes, I'll go here, I'll help with this, I'll help with that. And then I got burnt out, you know, whether it was work commitments or even hanging out with friends. You know, they want to hang out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I would be, yes, yes, yes. And I'm tired, and then I'm spending so much money. And I realized, no, I want to sit at home sometimes and rest and snuggle in my bed, you know. And they would be like, you're not coming with us? And I'll be like, no, I'm not. And so it was a learning process, you know, and I had to learn that. Can you give our audience an example of a good boundary and what it actually is? I think people have a general understanding of boundaries, but they don't know what that sounds like.
Okay. So a boundary, once again, it's the line in the sand. It's what separates you from another person. It protects your peace. It would be in terms of saying the same answer to every single person as opposed to just one specific person, because then that's not necessarily a boundary. So a boundary would be, you know, for myself, after, let's just make up something, don't call me after 9 p.m. It wouldn't be, well, if so-and-so calls me after 9 p.m., that's okay, I'll answer the phone. Because once again, I'm not setting that boundary. My boundary is breakable or it's bendable, and then it will be breakable, because now if one person, then another person will call, and then next thing you know, you're on the phone till midnight. So, you know, it's making sure that it's a no for everybody, that it protects you, that it's not just for this person or that person, because really we keep forgetting about the relationship with ourselves, and we can create a toxic relationship with ourselves. And that's even a harder one to get out of than it is with another person, because that other person, you know, somebody's going to have a breaking point. But what happens when we have our own breaking point? That's when somebody moves a piece of paper and we just start freaking out, you know, because it really wasn't about that piece of paper. It was about everything that we were over scheduling and doing this and not saying no, and just it gets to be too overwhelming. So we always think of relationships with another person, but really the relationship with ourselves is the most important one, because to identify any toxicity, if you look at another person, it's that hot and cold. Well, we're hot and cold to ourselves as well. So, you know, we can, you know, teeter totter and go back and forth and be like, well, I don't know, and be indecisive. So really, we can still display those traits just for us that we display in other relationships as well. So the relationship with self is the most important one, because I would always ask my clients this when they talk about they want to be with somebody, and I go, would you date you? And they go, what? And I go, would you date you? Would you date yourself right now the way that you are? They're like, well, no. So then don't be angry. Like, you know, you got to fix what you want, because what we want, you know, we project that. You know, we can project all those things. We can, like, you know, even like our energy levels, like our abundance, we can have all of that good stuff come our way when we're treating ourselves good, because we can't want good things while we're treating ourselves poorly. And we can still do that just by not even taking care of ourselves when it comes to sleep. I have a terrible sleep schedule. Trust me, I am no saint when it comes to these things. Like, I still struggle. I'm only human.
Oh, I know. We had a lot of 3 o'clock sport rooms, so I remember 3 a.m. What was it called? The night owls or the night hawks? I forgot what you called it.
After hours, after hours. That's what it was. We still have those too from time to time. From time to time, we do. But it comes with just really being honest with ourselves. You know, if we're questioning ourselves, then we're questioning so much more than that. Like whenever I hear the benefit of the doubt, I stop right there and I go, "What did you just say?" And they go, "Well, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt." And I said, "No, no, no. I want you to tell me that you had this gut feeling, but you didn't want to trust or believe yourself. So you just said, I'll just throw out the window and I'll go this." And they go, "But that's not what I said." And I go, "What do you think the benefit of the doubt means?" You had the doubt. You're throwing it out. So it's
Yes.
really focusing on even the words that we say and being honest and really exploring that is super, super important. But it's difficult, you know, it's difficult. We have to learn how to say no, because if we can't take care of ourselves, then how are we going to take care of someone else? And, you know, do we want to be helping or do we want to enable? And that's also another difficult one. You know, I would always say, "Sure, let me help you." But then they're doing it. And I'm like, "Oh, just let me do it for you." You know, I'm enabling. I'm enabling everybody. You know, my son used to love to help me clean because I'd be like, "Okay, no, you're fine. Go back. I got this. I got this." And he was like, "Sweet." You know, he was out of there. But it's difficult. And I still ask myself these questions. Am I helping or enabling? Am I people pleasing or am I being vulnerable? You know, is this a yes because it's a real yes, or is it a yes because I just want somebody to like me? Or you know, and these are real honest answers. But our self-esteem really carries out even to the people that we surround ourselves by. And that's something very difficult. My mom raised me with guilty by association. And that used to drive me up the wall because I was, you know, everybody, I wanted to help everybody. But she was right. You know, I would help so much of the wrong type of people that there was nothing left. There was nothing left. And like one of the best exercises that I can ever give anybody is you take a piece of paper and anytime someone hurts your feelings, like the same person, you just crumple that paper. And then when you open it up, do that for about a week and see what's left. And when I did that, there were no lines. It was fabric. It was 2 weeks. And then write a letter to your favorite person. And then you're going to see this paper is so ugly, but that's your heart. That's like the most visual representation of your heart, because when someone's crushing it over, how are you going to give it to someone else? And so those little visual reminders are helpful, but we can even do that not in heartbreaking situations, but also when we're overcompensating for other people and lacking what we're giving to ourselves, because that does hurt our heart. And then we can crumple it and then we can see there's not going to be much left. So it's really important to choose ourselves, to have those healthy boundaries. It's okay to say no. Every day is a new day. There's no mistakes. There's only lessons. All those things I could tell you, but they are really helpful because you have to treat yourself well, or nobody is going to know how to do that, because we do set the precedent on how people treat us. If we speak poorly to ourselves because of our inner critic, notice how people don't speak kindly to us either. So, you know, and it would be one of those things where, well, you called yourself that. And then my argument was like, but that's me. But then I realized what I was setting up. I was setting up the road on how other people were going to treat me. So lots of awareness.
Yes, and you mentioned something earlier that really struck a chord with me. You mentioned you have people ask themselves, would they date themselves? And so I started practicing that a couple years back, and I was going through a lot of things in my personal life, and I said, no, I wouldn't date me right now. I don't have the capacity, you know, and I'm going through a lot of stuff, and it's like it wouldn't be fair for somebody to come into this situation right now. And I still kind of do that self-reflection. I kind of think to myself, would I want to date somebody who does this or talks like this? You know, I use it kind of as a mirror to kind of make sure that I'm in the right space where I need to be. You know, am I truly ready? And it's a hard thing to do, because a lot of times we may want a relationship, we may want love, but we're really not ready. And it's hard, you know.
But that's that honesty, you know, because then we're not looking for love. We're looking for a savior. You know, we're not looking for a partnership. We're looking for a parent. And that dynamic is never going to end up to be healthy, right? When we want someone to nurture and care for us, We have to be able to do that for ourselves. And mainly, we don't know our own needs, because why is it that the most unsafe people fulfill the most amount of our needs? How many people know what their needs are? Out in the beginning, I was like food, clothing, and shelter, like the bare minimum. But no, I want somebody that is authentic. I want somebody that, is consistent. All those things are really important to me, but it has to also be something that I display as well, because if I'm not doing it, then it's an unlevel, uneven playing field. So, but the honesty, the awareness that we have, and the other thing that we need to remind ourselves of is if we're doubting ourselves, we need to focus on what we're doubting. If we're doubting that we're maybe just not ready, that's true honesty. But if we doubt that we're not good enough or things like that, that's the stuff we need to explore, because we also have to remember that there's another person who's allowed to say yes or no, and we're not making those decisions for them. So sometimes we will stop people from being in our lives, but they also have that choice and that option to be in our lives. But we also have the choice and option to say, this is not working. But to identify when we're presenting a wall, as opposed to being really honest, that's a beautiful awakening moment for sure. And walls are safe. Walls are awesome. But, they're protective for healing, but people are not equipped with grappling hooks to climb those walls and get to know us. So little by little, when we're ready, we start to bring them down. And then you start to really have like true relationships and friendships and all these great things, because you now know what you deserve, and you know what you will put up with and what you won't put up with. And that's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, I like that. And it's true. I think we have to trust our gut. You mentioned that earlier too, like people have the benefit of the doubt. I've been learning more and more to trust my gut on people. What I found in a lot of patterns in my relationships and friendships was I didn't trust myself. It was like I knew I didn't want this relationship. I knew I wanted to like end it, but I said, no, my reasons for ending it aren't good enough. Like I didn't trust my feelings that I had. So I stayed too long, to where it was like I had no choice but to leave. And it was like, oh, I knew a year ago, 2 years ago, a few months ago. And so I'm learning now to trust myself. And that was one of my problems with repeating these patterns, is not trusting that gut instinct. Like we know something is wrong, something is off, but we convince ourselves, no, this is fine, it's okay. So that's also a learning, truth that I had to accept. And I'm trying to continue to adopt that in everything, because I feel like we have those feelings when it comes to a lot of things, whether it's the job, whether it's, overcommitting ourselves to something. We have to trust that we know what's best for ourselves and we know what feels good to us.
Well, rather than the questioning of it, the real question would be, have I ever been wrong? I haven't met a single
Ooh.
person who has ever said I was wrong when I had that intuition, that gut feeling. And so rather than questioning it, it's okay, I'm feeling this. Have I ever been wrong? I promise everyone will say no. I haven't met a single person that could think back and they were wrong. So that intuition, they knew it all along. We knew it all along. And that's really what helps build that trust back up with ourselves, because we were always right, at least with that part, with what we were feeling. We knew something was off. We didn't know what it was, but we still ignored it. And the next thing we know, our hearts are devastated because our spouse is cheating or anything like that. And, a lot of heartbreak comes from that. A lot of heartbreak comes from anything that's like separation. But that trust in yourself, that's a beautiful gift. That is one of the greatest things that we have been gifted since the moment we were born. So it's that intuition with oneself. It's a beautiful thing. So
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So, Christina, how can people get in touch with you? How can they get a touch of your books, your journals, all of those things?
absolutely. They can go on healingmyfeelings.com, and the blog, everything is on there, all the links, the books. those are able to navigate, but they're all up on there. So you just kind of got to click around, and I'm working on some other things that are going to have like just a spread out of all the different links for all the rooms and things like that. But yep, everything's on healingmyfeelings.com.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Christina, for coming again. It's been another wonderful episode with you, and I look forward to joining your shadow group class because I still got lots of work to do. I'm a work in progress.
Well, aren't we all? Thank you so much for having me, and I
so
can't wait to
thank you
see
so
you.
much again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's it for tonight, guys. Remember to watch Pink Table Talk every Wednesday, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern on Lawin Media Network, either through our YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, and all podcast platforms. Good night, everybody, and see you next week.